Okay, so a couple last things that we want to finish up with fields. First of all, if we want to add another field, we simply open our database or a table in Design View and we type in the name of our field and select an appropriate data type. So for example, if we wanted to add, sort of notes about a particular employee, maybe if there were problems or they're exemplary or something that we need to know about an employee, we simply type in the field name and we choose an appropriate field. Now the text data type only can store 255 characters, which is, a few characters, but that's really only, a couple of paragraphs. What happens if our notes on a particular employee over time start to grow to 3 or 4 paragraphs, or even longer? Well, there's a data type called the memo data type that will store much, much, much larger fields of text. We also have, the number data type, the currency we've talked about. Some of these others are useful. Attachment, for example, if you want to add pictures of the employees to the database. OLE objects are a little more complicated. We won't cover them here as with auto numbers. But the rest of them, those ones we tend to use. All right, now let's say we wanted to set a business rule, and let's do the salary field. So let's say that at this paper company, the salaries are capped for all employees, let's say at $150,000. But we also have, a minimum salary for for whatever the newest employee that's getting the least amount of money. We also have a minimum salary. And so what we can do is we can set a rule so that this salary field has to have a minimum and a maximum value. Let's say the minimum value is 25,000 and the maximum value is 150,000. So we can limit the salaries that go into the database to only values that are in that range. And here's how we do that. There's two properties that are important to use here. The first one is called the validation rule property. So it's down here. We're selecting salary, and we're going to set up a validation rule. Now these rules have to be formatted in a very particular way or Access won't understand the rules. We can use mathematical operations. Remember, salary, even though it's currency, is just a number. So we can use mathematical operations, and so we can type in things like, well, if we want it to be greater than or equal to 25,000, because that's our minimum salary, then we could type in the greater than sign, and then equal, and then 25,000. Oops. And that would be a rule that if we went and tried to, we'll save that, and let's say we tried to add a new employee in there and we only wanted to pay them 20,000, Access would give us an error message. It's kind of a gobbledygook error message, but it's an error message that doesn't allow that value to be in there. So and you can always play around with those and test out new rules to see if they're working. If you need to, you can also hit escape here. And then we can go back without getting additional errors for not having a primary key and such. So that rule works. And additionally, we want to add an additional rule here, so it has to be less than or equal to 150,000. So if we want to add an additional rule, we can put an and, just a special keyword in there, and use less than or equal to 150. So that's one way of writing our rule. And we can go and, check that rule, try to give somebody the big bucks, and we should not be able to add a salary of greater than 150,000 in there. Okay, so that's one way of writing our rule. It's actually the way I don't prefer, but some people will like this because it's close to mathematical operation. You can also add in, instead of writing this, it's exactly equivalent to use the between operator. So I'm going to type in the between way of writing this. So this way, between is an inclusive of the endpoints, so it includes 25,000 and 150,000 and everything in between. I actually prefer this. It's kind of an Access way of writing it, but it's for me this is the way that makes sense. Doesn't really matter for your project. Any of those options would work. Now the last part we want to do here is we want to not just make it so that we can't put bad numbers into that field, numbers that violate our business rules. We also want to, when somebody actually breaks the rule, we want to give them some error messages that will, help them out. And so this next property, the validation text property we'll type into, will give some information to whoever's typing things in, why those values that they're trying to type in are incorrect. So I'm going to set the mic down and do that real quick. Alright, so I set a validation text that values must be between 25,000 and 150,000, and we will go and try to violate that rule. And now we have a custom error message that says exactly what is the matter with that rule. Now, that brings up a good little point, is I've typed this value in. If you need to type in a validation text, or you need to call the name of a new field, or the name of a new table, or the name of a query when we get to queries, everything needs to be typed in exactly correctly, because your project will be graded by a computer, and if it doesn't find exactly what it's looking for, then it will be incorrect. So please be mindful of any typos that you see. Oh, we have one more thing to do with properties and fields and relationships. Let's save this and close it, and let's go to our Database Tools tab and open up our Relationships view. Now this shows the relationships in our database, but it doesn't actually show all of them unless we bring the table over onto this to this canvas on the right. So I'm going to actually bring the job positions table over. I just clicked and dragged that over. You can also show table and double click on which table you want, or click and then add. But you'll notice this job positions table right here, and the employees table that we've been working on aren't actually on this canvas. So I'm going to bring them over, and you'll notice that they have a relationship. That relationship was created when we made the lookup. Now if we wanted to, we could make our own relationship. We could relate one of these to another table by just clicking and dragging on the field in one and relating it to a particular field in the other table. But we're not going to do that here. What I do want to point out, though, is if you need to get rid of a relationship, you can click on it and then right-click and delete the relationship. Or we can also edit this relationship. And sometimes we want to edit the relationship in this way. We have these three checkboxes here. At the top it lists which table and which field are being related together, and that's fine. We want the job position field in each of those two tables to relate together, and that's great. But we have these three tables here. Let me explain what each of them means. The first is enforce referential integrity. So what that means is that there has to be, if you put a job position ID in this table, the many side of the table, this is a one-to-many relationship, if you put the position ID here, what that means is that there has to be a position ID in this table. You can't just add additional positions without it being in the job positions table. And that's a good thing for in this circumstance, because we want to have all of our job positions listed in this table and only have the ones that are in the table selected. The second thing we want to check is this second box, which is Cascade Update. What that means is, let's say that I was to change the position ID of one of the positions in this table. If we have this box checked, what will happen is that all of those foreign keys that are point to the primary key that we just changed will automatically change. That's a good thing. The last option is Cascade Delete. There's very, very few occasions where you actually want to have this checked. I generally, as a rule, do not check this. What that would do is, let's say we removed a position. We no longer have a particular position. Let's say that we don't have assistant regional managers, we have assistant to the regional manager, and we want to remove the assistant regional manager positions. If we delete that position, then, and this box is checked, then what will happen is that anyone who has that position will also be removed from the database, and that's not what we want. And so we're going to leave that unchecked. So we'll hit OK, and then now you'll notice that this now says one-to-many because we've enforced the referential integrity on that one-to-many relationship.